Salutations, our Morbid Maggots! Joker here, welcoming you back to the Morbid Veil. Today we've got another special treat for you. To continue our countdown to Halloween, we decided to make a Baldur's Gate 3 build for Skyrim. But first, if you haven't seen our previous Halloween countdown video, then click the pop-up now to view it. Now let me introduce you to Murder Incarnate himself, the Balspawn. Long ago, during the Merethic era, Molag Bal ravaged a young woman named Lame Beolfag. She was such an innocent beauty, a devout priestess of Arkay. In the sight of Lord Bal, she was perfect, but not in the way you would categorize perfection. Because of her devoutness to Arkay, her exquisite beauty and innocence, she was the perfect victim for Lord Bal's greatest creation, the vampire. It is said, on the night that Lord Molag Bal ravaged her, he shed a single drop of his blood onto her forehead. She was found by a tribe of nomads who tended to her wounds, but to no avail. Lame Beolfag died. The nomads took her body and prepared to burn her on a funeral pyre. And as the flames began to lick at her corpse, her eyes snapped open, and in a crazed fury she murdered every man, woman, and child within the tribe. She tore the throats from the women, swallowed the eyes of the children, and ravaged the men just as brutally as she herself had been ravaged by Molag Bal. When she finally came to her senses, Lame Beolfag was horrified at what she had done. She called out to her god Arkay, begging him to comfort her, begging for him to save her from the nightmare she was living. But no help came from the god of death. The rest of her story has been lost to history, for few know the events which immediately followed that horrible night. As Lame Beolfag wandered the wilderness, searching for a safe place to hide and rest, a woman approached her. The woman was older than Lame Beolfag and wore a black robe made from silk of spiders. She took Lame into her home and gave her food and wine. But the wine was not wine at all, but in fact was a wretched potion brewed in the depths of oblivion that forced Lame to go into labor. You see, Molag Bal hadn't just turned her into a vampire, he also left his seed within her womb. The horrid witch then cut the baby from Lame Beolfag, cradling the bloodied monstrosity in her arms. Like his father, the creature had a tail, horns, and was covered in scales. Like his monstrous mother, his complexion was pale, and his eyes were dead and filled with a ravenous hunger. As Lame tried to get to her knees, desperately wanting to murder the witch, the shrouded woman vanished without a trace, taking the child with her. Deep within the spiral skein, the witch reverted to her true form, Mephala, the Daedric prince of secrets and murder. There she took one of her talons, and with a single finger cut open one of her nipples and held the child to her breast. He drank in her blasphemous blood and murderous milk, his soul becoming more twisted than before. As Lady Mafala nourished the babe, Lord Bal and Lady Namira entered into a realm. Together, the three looked down upon the child, hellish grins creeping over each of their faces. This monster, this unholy creature, would be the ruin of all Nirn. He alone would cause death and destruction on a scale never before seen. All of Nirn would fall, and he would rule over the world on a mountain of mangled corpses. For eons, Mafala, Molag Bal, and Namira raised the boy, teaching him the ways of murder, stealth, and domination. During that time, he had made a dark name for himself in the universe. The Balspawn, as the Daedra called him, used his malevolent powers to reach into the realm of Nirn and manipulate mortals in secret and bloody ways. The greatest of his achievements was the creation of the Dark Brotherhood. He himself, whom the Night Mother knew as Sithis, would collect the souls from those whom his disciples murdered in his name. Even Molag Bal was impressed by his son's cunning and lust for blood. But his rule fell when a certain necromancer told Lame Beolfag of her son's existence. Knowing his fate would be grim for his treachery against Molag Bal, Manamako decided to reveal to Lame Bal the truth of what became of her son so many eons ago. Her son was stolen by Mafala, raised by her, Namira, and Molag Bal, to create a terrible and bloodthirsty monster, far more heinous than that of a common vampire. The Blood Matron harbored a deep hatred for both Arkay and Molag Bal, and now her hatred burned hotter and branched off towards two other Daedric princes. She could not allow the fruit of her womb to be such a vile creature, and so Lame Bal did the only thing she could do to save him. Lame Bal took an Elder Scroll, 3 paladins, a high priest of Akatosh, a powerful necromancer, and a moth priest, and headed deep into the spiral skein where her son resided. Luckily, her son was resting, his eyes shut as he listened to the screams of the souls that the Dark Brotherhood had sent to him. Quickly, the paladins used their divine powers to hold the Balspawn in place. The High Priest of Akatosh and the Necromancer opened their own tomes, while the Moth Priest unraveled the Elder Scroll. All 3 began to chant their own powerful incantations. The Balspawn roared and convulsed, his mind beginning to scramble from the power of the 3 rituals. When the rituals drew to a close, a shockwave rippled through the spiral skein, alerting all of the Spider Daedra to the presence of Lame Bal and her companions. Quickly, they finished their rituals, and with the Moth Priest's final words, he created a portal which sent the Balspawn far away. Then, in the 4th era, the portal opened, and the Balspawn's unconscious body fell from the sky. The next thing he knew, he was on a cart being taken to Helgen. When asked who he was, the Balspawn could hardly remember a thing. He struggled to think. The only name that came to him was the Dark Urge. Whatever that was, whatever he was, he knew one thing. He needed to kill something. Soon. Now, in keeping with the Baldur's Gate 3 style, this build is only going to go up to level 12. not. After escaping Helgen, the Dark Urge began to hone his skills. The first skills he focused on was stealth, heavy armor, two-handed, and defensive techniques. With these four honed, he could sneak around enemies to get to the perfect angle to slaughter them, and also be ready for any fight to come. As time went on, he began to focus on arcane skills, such as the School of Destruction, which he effortlessly mastered, as well as conjuration, illusion, some restoration, and of course, enchanting. Early in his travels, the Dark Urge wore whatever armor he could, and wielded any greatsword that bore a sharper edge than the previous. As time went on and memory fragments began to return to him, the Dark Urge began to dress in armor that felt more familiar. He chose a set of Daedric armor, with Daedric brawler gauntlets and Daedric boots. Due to his horns, he could not wear a Daedric helmet, and so he opted for something simple yet powerful, the ethereal crown, a magical item that greatly enhanced his power over the dead and the damned. Upon his hand he wore the vile ring of Namira, and around his neck a grotesque line of bones and feathers from a bone hawk. When eliminating foes, the Balspawn utilized the Blade of Woe for stealth, and the Ebony Blade for main combat, which he of course fueled with the murder of his allies. As for the Dark Urge's companion, he was accompanied by Cicero, the Keeper of the Night Mother. The demented jester wore his iconic headpiece, paired with a set of Daedric mail. He wielded two gifts from his master, the Mace of Molag Bal, and a Daedric bow called Bloodsip. Since he carried such devastating weapons, the Dark Urge made certain that Cicero carried plenty of black soul gems wherever they lurked. And now for the gameplay. Early on, the Dark Urge focused on recovering his memories and surviving in the world, from joining up with the companions to doing odd jobs for the citizens in exchange for knowledge and coin. The Dark Urge helped those who he deemed worthy of his aid, or those who could assist him in one way or another. But always the urges whispered to him, "Kill, kill, and kill again. Slaughter and dominate." Who, or rather what, was he? Some vile monster from the pits of oblivion? Perhaps a serial killer chased from the streets of Cyrodiil? Whatever he was in the past, the urges sought to remind him, and remind him they did. Though he would help many, he would also kill many. Innocent men and women slaughtered in the night, sometimes even in broad daylight. Throats slit, bodies butchered beyond recognition, the Dark Urge's hands drenched in his prey's blood. At first, he was horrified. What could cause him to commit such horrible crimes without any recollection? But quickly, the blood felt like an old friend, like a long-lost lover's embrace. The Dark Urge continued to search for someone to help reclaim his memories. But in the meantime, he began to learn to be one with his urges, slaughtering men and women whenever he pleased, no longer being a thrall to his violent impulses. When it came to combat, the Dark Urge would stick to the shadows, picking off some of his victims before engaging in direct conflict. When in open battle, the Dark Urge used all manner of tactics and powers to his advantage. He would typically summon a flame thrall, a seeker, and a death priest to aid him in battle. Fighting along with him in his summons was his faithful servant Cicero and his Wrathman thrall. From a distance, the Balspawn would destroy his enemies with fireball, ice storm, and various lightning spells. Up close, he would swing the infamous Ebony Blade, spilling the blood of all who got in his way, innocent or otherwise. And now for the powers used by the Balspawn. Bloody Step was enacted by the Balspawn, unleashing a burst of pure terror, frightening all nearby enemies. From there, he used an invisibility potion to help blend in with the darkness, appearing to slay his enemies, starting with those who resisted the terror. After cutting their throats, he would disappear into thin air again, and repeat the process until all of his prey had fallen. Blood Curse was performed by the Balspawn, unleashing his bloodlust, forcing it into the minds and souls of all those nearby, causing them to slaughter one another in glorious carnage. Those who resisted or survived the bloodbath were forced to fight against their reanimated brethren for a second time. Father's Blessing was performed by the Balspawn, unleashing a firestorm, calling upon his father's vile blood and transforming into a vampire lord. From there, he would slay mortal men and women with his blood magic. But he would always save one victim for last, so he could drink them dry amidst their fallen comrades. And now for the timeline. After escaping Helgen with Ralof, the Dark Urge followed his new friend to Riverwood, where he met Ralof's sister, Gerda, a beautiful Nord woman with hair like the sun and skin almost as white as snow. Such a beautiful woman, who would make an even more beautiful corpse. The thought of gutting her right there was intoxicating, overwhelming even, and it took every ounce of strength the Dark Urge had to resist his wretched desire. From there, something drew the Dark Urge to Bleak Falls Barrow, where he sated his urge by cutting down the bandits, Draugr, Skeevers, and a giant spider. Not long after, the Dark Urge found himself in Dragon's Reach, with no memory of how he got there, the taste of blood on his tongue. After speaking to Jarl Balgruf and giving the previously acquired Dragonstone to Farengar, the Dark Urge got the chance to fight a dragon. Once the monstrous beast was slain, something peculiar happened. Power, like fire and light, began to leave the beast's body and entered into the Dark Urge. As it did, the Dark Urge fell to his knees, and a single memory returned to him. A hall of bloody corpses, crudely stitched together, pillars of bones, a stained glass window of a skull about to devour an infant, and in front of the window, a throne made of blood-stained swords. The memory faded, and the Dark Urge found himself surrounded by the Whiterun Guard, calling him Dragonborn, a foreign word, one that held no significant meaning to the Dark Urge, but clearly meant a lot to the Nords. Upon learning more about what they meant, the Dark Urge traveled to High Hrothgar to learn more about his Dragonborn blood. Of course, he did not mention his urges to them. What sane monk would help a monstrosity obtain even greater power? They sent him to obtain a sacred horn, and quickly he found himself back in Riverwood. After killing the cultist that ambushed him, and returning the horn to the Greybeards, the Dark Urge made his way to Markarth, drawn by some force he could only describe as a mother's kiss and a father's scorn. There, the Dark Urge uncovered a cult of Namira and quickly became her champion. Although he did not know her and she said nothing about who he was, the Dark Urge could not help but feel at home beside her altar. Only hours later, the Dark Urge discovered an altar to Molag Bal. Again, the feeling and voice of the Lord of Domination was familiar, but the Dark Urge could not understand why. In pursuit of further knowledge, the Dark Urge sought out the College of Winterhold and began studying the arcane arts. If the soul of a dragon could restore a single memory, then perhaps this amnesia was arcane in origin. Alas, no such writings were found within the college. But his time there was not fruitless. They'd granted him access to many powerful secrets and artifacts, as well as the position of Archmage, a useful title which he later used to devastating effectiveness. However, he was forced to leave the college abruptly, saying he needed to conduct some research. In truth, he had killed 2 of the students, the Khajiit and the Nord. Both showed such potential, but their mutilated corpses brought an even greater smile to the Dark Urge's face. As time went on, the Dark Urge slaughtered more and more dragons, until he had slain 32 of them, including Alduin and Parthenax, finally reclaiming more of his memories. He remembered not only standing face to face with Namira and Molag Bal, but another Daedric prince. Her voice was soft like a feather and sticky like a spider web, and her presence was familiar, too familiar. As his eyes snapped open again, the Dark Urge rushed to Whiterun and began asking anyone he could for information, until the woman at the tavern told him about the strangeness of the Jarl's children. He went into Dragon's Reach, and there the feeling was strongest. Whoever that Daedric prince was, her power lingered within Dragon's Reach, faded, but still noticeable. The Dark Urge spoke with Jarl Balgruuf about his children, and from there he met with the youngest son, a clearly troubled boy. As he continued with his investigation, the Dark Urge uncovered the ebony blade, and finally it clicked. As he held the blade in his hands, all of his memories returned to him, and his urges were gone. The ebony blade was not an artifact of Mephala, but his artifact, his reliquary, an extension of his murderous will. Finally, he knew who he was. He was Sithis, the Balspawn, son of Molag Bal, cradled in Namira's pit of maggots, nursed on Mephala's murderous blood and sinful milk. He wasted no time in restoring his blade to its former glory, letting it drink the blood of those closest to him. Immediately after, the Balspawn began to seek out the Volkihar clan, whom he knew could restore a fraction of his father's vicious blessing, which had been repressed by his mother's actions. Once those powers returned to him, and his skill mastery increased tenfold, the Balspawn sought out the Dark Brotherhood, knowing that he could gain control of his cult here in Skyrim, using them as his instrument of murder. He focused on the whispers and desires for death, and the prayer uttered by Ventus Aretino reached his ears. He traveled to Riften and killed Grelod the Kind before he met with the Wicked Child. Not only did he kill a Dark Brotherhood target, but he killed her before the child had a chance to speak with one of the assassins, a feat surely to attract his disciples' attention. Soon after being confronted by Astrid directly, the Balspawn became the listener. The Night Mother looked for the mark Sithis would place on his listeners, and mistook the power of her master as a sign for the listener. But this was all right, as he didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention. It was during this time in his travels that he came across the legend of the Ethereum Forge, and soon came into possession of enough Ethereum to forge a powerful crown. Towards the end of his duty to murder the Emperor of Tamriel, Astrid proved herself to be deceptive and cowardly, an unworthy leader of his cult. As she drew her last breath, the Balspawn grinned wickedly, because he could not wait to revel in her screams of agony once he returned home to the spiral scheme to collect her soul. Once the Dark Brotherhood was restored to its gruesome glory, the Balspawn returned to the Volkihar clan. Within a week, Harkon fell to the Ebony Blade, and Sithis claimed his lordship of the Volkihar clan for his own. From there, he sought secrets across the seas in Solstheim. Again, his conquest was swift and brutal, and Nirak fell before the Ebony Blade and its master. With all the secrets of Apocrypha unraveled before him, Sithis could achieve his blasphemous birthright. Deep within Apocrypha, the Balspawn discovered exactly what he needed: the secrets of godhood. He would return to his realm, and from there he would extinguish all life. But he stopped. Why return to the throne to have mortals slay one another for him? Why not remain in Nirn in his godly form and turn it into a graveyard? And so, that's exactly what he did. Using the blasphemous ancient texts from Apocrypha, the Balspawn stood between oblivion and Nirn, and summoned all of the souls from his palace in the spiral skein, the ones who had been sacrificed in his name. These souls tore through the veil and were sucked down into his throat, their power dispersing throughout his body. His eyes became black as night, and the sun itself blackened at his dark awakening. He was stronger than he had ever been, and Hermaeus Mora himself cowered at the sight of him. Though the Daedric Prince of Knowledge knew it was possible, the amount of souls required would have taken eons to collect. How did this mere mortal have so many, he wondered. The Balspawn grinned at the Prince of Knowledge, seemingly aware of Mora's thoughts. He said, "Behold, I am Sithis, god of slaughter." Hermaeus Mora tried to flee, but he was captured by Sithis, who bound the Daedric Prince of Knowledge to his will, forcing him into submission. Then the portals of Apocrypha opened. Seekers and lurkers came flooding into Nirn. Then Cold Harbor, the spiral skein, and the scuttling void opened up as well, their armies pouring into Nirn. Within a month, all of Nirn had become a sphere of blood and rotting flesh. Every muscle torn from bone, every eye sucked from its skull. The divines tried to intervene, but they were no match for the god of slaughter. They were cut down, their bodies used to craft a throne of flesh and bone. Then it was her turn. Sithis bound his mother, Lamebal, and slowly he began to devour her blood and soul. She begged and pleaded, explaining she wanted the best for him, and tried to give him a life suitable of a mortal. But for Sithis, there was nothing better than what he was made for. He lived for blood and death. He strived for carnage and the screams of his victims. Even his own mother was but fuel for his insatiable bloodlust. In time, everyone, everything was dead. The only soul that remained in Nirn was Sithis, god of slaughter. He walked through his blood-soaked kingdom, reveling in the destruction that he had wrought. But his bloodshed was not over. Fearful of what he had become, Molag Bal and Namira attacked. But they too were cut down by the Ebony Blade. their immortal souls devoured by the god of slaughter, the very monster they created. The other Daedra tore into an urn and attacked, each falling before Sithis. Jiggalak, Hircine, Malacath, all of them fell, until only Mephala remained. She did not fight, nor did she beg for her life. Sithis turned to her and whispered, "I saved you for last." Tears streamed down Mephala's face as she threw her arms open and fell to her knees, thanking him profusely for saving her for last, begging him to do it, to kill her and devour her. In one swift motion, the ebony blade pierced her heart, and Sithis devoured her soul. Truly, nothing was left in existence. No Aedra, no Daedra, only him. Sithis destroyed what remained of the realms, until there was only darkness, his darkness. He closed his eyes and drifted off into an eternal sleep, listening to the sounds of the souls he had devoured cry out in agony and pain from within him. We hope you enjoyed our truly diabolical build, the Balspawn. If you did, then hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and smack that bell icon to be notified of our future videos. Have a great rest of your week, everybody, and we'll see you all here next time on the Morbid Veil.